Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jhonna, and this is Jhonna Unfiltered. Today's topic is one that's actually a little personal for me, because this combination is mine. We're looking at INFJ combined with the year of the rabbit in the Chinese zodiac. Before I get into it, the usual disclaimer. I'm not an astrologer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in any of this officially. What I am is someone who's curious, who reads a lot, and who shares what I find here as part of my learning diary. I personally don't believe the Chinese zodiac or any zodiac determines who you are or what your life will be. And MBTI, for me, is also just a pattern and a guide, not a fixed definition of a person. But I know that introverts love to reflect. And I know that people who identify as INFJ often spend a lot of time trying to understand themselves. So I make these videos for that community. For people who find this kind of exploration useful, interesting, or just comforting. If that's not you, that's completely okay. No judgment. But if you're curious, let's learn together. Now, let me share a little story first because I mentioned this is personal. I was born in January 1988. For most of my life, I thought I was born in the year of the dragon. My father actually believed this too. The dragon in Chinese astrology is associated with strength, confidence, boldness, ambition. And when I was young, my father gave me a necklace with a dragon pendant. He said it matched my birth year. I wore it without thinking much about it. It was only years later, when I looked it up myself, that I found out the truth. In 1988, the Chinese New Year fell in February. So anyone born in January of that year was technically still in the previous lunar year, which means I wasn't born in the year of the dragon after all. I was born in the year of the rabbit. A dragon pendant for a rabbit. I found that both funny and oddly fitting. But more on that in a moment. Now let me explain what the rabbit represents in Chinese astrology, for anyone who's not familiar. The rabbit is the fourth animal in the 12-year Chinese zodiac cycle. Rabbit years include 1951, 1963, 1975, 1987, 1999, 2011, and 2023. People born in the year of the rabbit are traditionally described as gentle, careful, and perceptive. They value peace and stability. They don't love chaos or conflict. They're drawn to comfort and beauty. They tend to be graceful in how they navigate social situations, not loud about it, not aggressive, but quietly skilled at reading the room and adjusting. They're also known for being loyal and selective about who they trust. The rabbit is cautious. It doesn't rush into things. It observes first. It thinks before it moves. And it would much rather find a peaceful path through something than fight its way through. Now combine that with INFJ. INFJ stands for introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. People who identify with this type tend to feel deeply, think long-term, and have a strong internal sense of right and wrong. They're empathetic almost to a point that surprises people. They notice what others are feeling before anything is said. They're also private, very selective about who they let close, and they have a rich internal world that most people never fully get to see. So when you put those two things together, what do you actually get? At first glance, it might seem like you'd get someone who's almost too soft for the world. Too gentle. Too peace-seeking. But I actually think the combination is more quietly strong than people expect. The rabbit isn't just timid. The rabbit is strategic in its gentleness. It moves carefully not because it's afraid, but because it's paying attention. And the INFJ isn't just sensitive. It has a very clear and firm internal structure of values that doesn't move regardless of what's happening outside. So the INFJ rabbit is someone who seems easy to be around, approachable, calm, non-threatening. But underneath that calm exterior is a very active inner world. They're processing everything. They're reading every interaction. They're forming impressions and connections and conclusions quietly, without broadcasting it. And those conclusions, once formed, tend to stick. Let me talk about the core personality of this combination more specifically. This is probably the most peace-oriented version of the INFJ. Both the type and the zodiac animals share a fundamental discomfort with aggression, conflict, and chaotic energy. They don't want to fight. They'll go a long way to avoid a fight. But that doesn't mean they're passive. It means they've learned to navigate situations in a way that minimizes unnecessary friction, which is actually a skill, not a weakness. They're also deeply intuitive about people. The INFJ already picks up on things most people miss. The rabbit sharpens that sensitivity further. This combination tends to sense something about a person very early, before there's any concrete evidence, and they're often right. They don't always know how to explain the feeling. They just know. And when they've known someone long enough, they know them in a way that's almost unsettling in how accurate it is. They also have an aesthetic sensibility that's worth mentioning. The rabbit in Chinese astrology is associated with an appreciation for beauty, calm environments, and things that carry meaning. INFJs also tend to be drawn to symbolism and layers of meaning in the things they surround themselves with. Put those two together, and you often get someone whose personal space, creative work, or way of expressing themselves feels very intentional. Every choice has a reason, even if they don't always explain it. Now let's talk about the inner experience of this combination, because I think this is where the most important truths are. There's a specific kind of conflict that lives inside the INFJ rabbit that I find very recognizable. The INFJ part of this person sees things clearly. It has opinions. It recognizes when something is wrong or when a truth needs to be said. But the rabbit part really struggles with being the one to say it. Not because they don't believe in honesty, but because the idea of disrupting the peace, of making someone uncomfortable, of creating a tense moment, is genuinely painful for them. So they often hold things internally for a very long time, hoping the situation resolves itself, hoping the other person will eventually understand without being told. And sometimes that works, but often it doesn't. And the weight of what they've been holding eventually becomes too much. The way this combination handles conflict is different from other INFJ versions. They don't tend to have a dramatic exit. They don't usually confront loudly. What they do is go quiet. They become politely distant. They don't argue, but they disengage. And that disengagement, when it comes from this combination, can feel colder than a fight would have. Because the warmth just disappears, and the person on the other end isn't always sure when it happened or why. This combination also has a tendency towards something I describe as slow patience followed by quiet finality. They'll give chance after chance because they genuinely believe in people and they hate giving up on someone they care about. But there's a limit. And when they reach it completely. There's no going back after a certain point. They've already made peace with the decision internally before they ever show it externally. In relationships, the INFJ rabbit is one of the most genuinely loyal combinations you'll find. They don't enter relationships casually. They don't give their trust easily or quickly. But when they do, the investment is real. They remember things. They notice things. They show up in quiet, thoughtful ways that the other person might not always recognize as love in the moment, but looks back on later and understands. The challenge in relationships for this combination is usually around self-expression. They tend to give more than they ask for. They tend to absorb more than they release. And over time, that imbalance can create a kind of quiet exhaustion that they don't always know how to address because addressing it requires exactly the kind of direct conversation they find so difficult. Learning to say what they actually need, without waiting for the other person to guess it, is one of the most important growth areas for this combination. In terms of work and daily life, they genuinely struggle in environments that are high conflict, unpredictable, or emotionally loud. They don't perform well when they're constantly managing tension around them. Their best work happens in conditions where they have enough quiet to actually think. They're excellent at work that requires depth, empathy, and long-term thinking. Teaching, writing, counseling, research, creative work, anything where their tendency to go deep is an asset rather than a liability. They're also very good at independent work. They don't need constant feedback or external validation to stay on track. They have a clear internal sense of whether something is good or not, and they trust that sense more than they trust most external opinions. Now, let me go back to the dragon pendant for a moment, because I think it connects to something real. When I found out I was actually a rabbit and not a dragon, I didn't feel disappointed. I felt something more like recognition, because the dragon description had never fully fit me. The boldness, the ambition, the desire to be seen and acknowledged, those weren't things I connected with in an honest way. But the rabbit description, the quietness, the sensitivity, the preference for peace, the careful selection of trust, the tendency to hold too much internally, the way conflict feels physically uncomfortable rather than just emotionally uncomfortable, that resonated. And I think that's the honest value of exploring any of these frameworks. Not to find a label that explains you perfectly, but to find descriptions that make you feel a little less alone in your specific way of being in the world. If you're an INFJ born in the year of the rabbit, or if any of what I've described today resonates with you for other reasons, I genuinely love to know what part hit closest to home. And if you're not, but you recognize someone in your life in this description, I'd love to hear about that too. Drop it in the comments, because this kind of conversation is exactly what this channel is for. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I didn't want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I'm Jhonna, and I'm currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I'm Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.